So I'm gonna record this. It probably says recording in progress. And the reason that we record our classes is because there may become one or two that you're not able to participate in for travel or other kinds of things that might get in the way, which is what makes Zoom learning so great. Especially, it's also not a university course in which if you don't show up, you might you might lose some participation points or something like that. And there's definitely no finals in our learning here
Yay.
together, but there's a lot of really wonderful learning that to take place, and it's a great honor that you have all chosen to join us on this learning journey for the class called How to Change Your Mind. And what I'll do in a moment is I'll bring up the syllabus and talk a little bit about the course overall, and then we have some text to study. Typically, we'll have texts. They'll typically come the day or as it did this morning, it comes in the morning. So hopefully with enough time for you to print them out, because some people like them printed, and especially because we toggle between the screens, and that way we can be engaged and participate. Our classes are an hour and a half long. For those who took our class last session, it was an hour, and we were like fighting for the time. So we've been able
Mm-hmm.
to kind of give ourselves a little bit of the breathing room with that extra half hour, and thanks for making it. So now you'll all sort of head off to lunch with hopefully not only hunger in your belly, but hunger in your thinking to learn more. And I think that kind of covers the basics of it. The other thing that I will say is that every time when we begin our class, we begin with a study for our prayer, or a prayer for our study. And then we will also offer a prayer of healing. Um, we'll offer a prayer of healing for those in need. Because we're a sizable class, and because our time is limited, we invite you to add into the chat box when we make those prayers of healing for our loved ones, and we'll collectively acknowledge them by scrolling through. You can even add reactions to the names that people add, and it's a way for us to feel a sense of closeness in the circles of caring that we inhabit, and bringing those circles a little closer to our learning. That's our goal. And I think that kind of covers it. So welcome to the class. Any first thoughts? Or it's really good. Well, I since we have some new people, let's have a very quick check in. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit of where you are in the world, because we have actually some people from far-flung places, and it's great. I mean, it's home where you are, but relative to where I'm sitting, it might be a little bit more arduous to journey. And I traveled the 405 this morning. For those who are in different places, tell us where you are, and let's see, um, something. Let's just say, if you can think of it, the most beautiful thing you have seen this springtime so far. Okay, the most beautiful thing you have seen so far in springtime. Okay. It- Um, let's see. Really, would you like to start? Can you do it, Marlene?
Oh, you want
Yeah,
ask me? Yeah.
yeah. Tell us who
Oh
you
my
are,
God,
and
there's
then
so many beautiful things that I've seen, but I think the most beautiful thing I've seen is a family of geese that landed in my pond outside of my house that are there. And I don't know where they go at night because they don't stay there at night, but they all arrive in the morning, and it's beautiful.
nice. So your name is Marlene, but where are you in the world?
Oh, I'm in Playa Vista, California. Sorry.
Wonderful. No, it's good. We got you. We got you, Ruth. Can you
I,
unmute yourself, Ruth? Yeah,
yes,
go ahead.
I'm in West Orange, New Jersey. And the most beautiful thing I've seen so far is that everywhere I turn, there are robins outside.
Mm, gorgeous. Okay, so we have two Ruths in our class, and I'm going to call you Ruth P. Okay,
Okay.
and I'll call Ruth B. So can I call on Ruth B now?
Thank you. It's not just one most beautiful thing, just everywhere I look, flowers are blooming, trees are sprouting their new, fresh, yellow-green leaves. And the beauty of spring just reminds me of renewal just in so many different ways. So it's been such a rough few years, and I've had illness in my family, and it brings the idea and the thoughts of healing. I just love all
Wonderful.
the colors that spring brings.
And where are you in the world, Ruth
I'm
P?
in Westwood in Los Angeles.
Very nice. Thank you. Audrey. Shalom.
Hi, I'm Audrey. I'm in Manhattan Beach, California. But Ruth P, I used to live in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, so not far from West Orange. And my late husband grew up in Westfield, so also not far from West Orange. And this spring, I saw a goldfinch for the first time, like right next to, like I was just on my slider downstairs, going out to my backyard, and there was a goldfinch hanging out there, like underneath an overhang, and literally just kept hanging out there. Now this will all just sound insane, but I'm convinced it's my mom, who, for those of you who don't know, she passed away in November, and she loved goldfinches. And I don't think I've ever seen one down here before. And literally, like, I went away, I came back, it was still there. I mean, it was kind of crazy. It even tried to, like, came up to the slider door.
You call that a sign.
Oh yeah, I believe in signs. And yeah, so that to me was the most beautiful thing I've seen this spring. It was a few weeks ago.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jeannie, where are you from, and what's the most beautiful thing you've seen this spring?
I have a question to ask. I'm having trouble with my router, and everybody's voice is kind of muffled, and everyone's picture is frozen. Is that just my computer or is everybody else dealing with this too?
Sorry, it's on you, but you might want to like leave and come back. That might reset something, or just
I already tried that. We're getting some new equipment. God bless AT&T. Don't get me started. Where am I from? God. So I was born in Los Angeles. I'm a real native. And the thing that I think has helped me the most the last month or so is just when the sun comes out. It was really, as much as we needed the rain, and as much as it was wonderful and it was important for our environment, there was something about, I'm just such a Californian, I'm not used to gray skies. So it was really wonderful to see the sun shining again.
beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeannie. Sherry.
I'm in Calabasas, California, and most amazing thing I've seen so far is you're in traffic on the 405 going north on whatever, I don't know what side of the freeway, the left-hand side, there's a waterfall.
Really? You're
Yeah,
gonna have to look for it.
which only if you're in traffic, which is every day, but yeah,
Yeah.
literally
good.
we saw a waterfall.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
How amazing is that? Beautiful. Thank you. And you live in
Calabasas.
in Calabasas. That's great. Awesome. Larry, should know.
Hi. I live in Woodland Hills, California, and like Jeannie, there's not many of us who were born and raised in LA, right? I think that so many amazing things. One, shedding winter away. I haven't been around much. I've been listening to the recordings because there's been a lot of sickness and craziness going on. For me, the most amazing thing so far this spring is watching all the neighbors and their pups come over every day to visit me and my pup who has bladder cancer. That there's so many amazing people out there who are so kind, regardless of what's going on in their life.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lori. And we feel the same about you. Sharon, you ready to share? You got to unmute though. You have to unmute. Sharon, you have to unmute. You have to
All
unmute.
right, there we go. I'm in Houston, Texas, on the southwest corner of Houston, and the most beautiful thing I've seen this year is two things: the beautiful smile on my daughter's face when she got out of a toxic work environment and is now working for an animal shelter, which is fantastic. She was very unhappy for 22 years. And the other thing is we have a bluebonnet wildflower garden in our backyard, and to watch it bloom up every year is beautiful. It was just a rainbow of colors. It was really terrific.
Beautiful. I love it. Laura, Rabbi Laura Owens, thank you.
Hello, so happy to be here with everyone. We are so fortunate that almost every year some beautiful hummingbird comes by and makes a nest right outside our kitchen. And about 3 days ago, we saw her flying around, and lo and behold, there is her beautiful nest, which happens to include some of the dog hair from one of our dogs that she found on the ground. So it kind of a beautiful harmonic convergence of creatures.
It's really beautiful. That's really
Oh, and
beautiful.
I'm in LA 90049.
Okay. Wonderful. Roberta, sassy. There's only one Roberta in our class so far. What are we gonna do?
But we
used
gotta
to have,
keep
like,
sassy.
all right,
Sassy
we're keeping
good.
sassy.
Okay. Roberta, sassy. I'm from Chatsworth, California, born and bred in Brooklyn, New York, and in Chatsworth for 45 years. And I'm enjoying the smell of our grapefruit blossoms and the
Ooh,
beautiful sunshine that's finally coming out.
nice. Thank you. Candy.
I'm with Roberta as far as the most beautiful thing is at this point is going outside, and I have to do it several times a day just to smell the orange blossoms and the different citrus blossoms. It's just wonderful, the return of all of that. And I live in Encino.
Wonderful. Thank you. Pam.
I'm also a native, born and bred in LA and living in the San Fernando Valley most of my life, in Calabasas for the last 31 years. And I didn't even know there were so many birds to notice, but I have been noticing all the beautiful colors. And tomorrow I'll see the most amazing thing. I'll see my son.
Oh, that's a spring. Hope springs eternal, something like that. That's beautiful. And Pam, who is sometimes involved with taxes, is the most relaxed accountant on the planet because the state of California has postponed the due date. So like that's what it looks like when you don't have to be stressed. You look wonderful.
Also when you don't do individual tax returns.
It's so good, right? Hey, Alice.
My keyboard didn't unmute me. I don't know why not. I'm originally from Minneapolis, moved out here when I was 18 and never looked back, living in West Hills. And spring is such a beautiful time. We have iris beds, probably 50 to 75 different plants. And because of the rain, the flowers that have come up this year are just absolutely incredible. The colors, they're just absolutely magnificent. So we're thoroughly enjoying them. But the other thing is we too have hummingbird feeders, but there are a pair of the most gorgeous orioles that have come to drink from the feeder. And their beaks are a little bigger than the hummingbirds. And so Donald drilled out every other hole in the hummingbird feeders. And so they come and they know which holes they can drink out of. And we see them several times a day. And of course, the male is spectacularly gorgeous. And we're really happy to see them. So
Beautiful.
I love spring.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Kate.
My name is Kate Golub Smith, And I'm in Santa Barbara, but I grew up in Westwood. And the most beautiful thing that I see almost every day is the drive up Gibraltar Road to where my family lived, on the top of Gibraltar Road. It's just so beautiful to see the new growth and then at Flores Flat, there are just dozens of waterfalls that we're at the head springs of Mission Creek. So we have 3 different springs, and the flow of water is just so beautiful.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Linda.
Well, yesterday I saw a rufous hummingbird that was sitting on my birds of paradise, which are all in bloom. And that made me smile. But the best gift this spring, my husband has been really ill and he's getting better. And yesterday he walked in the house without his walker. So he's practicing walking without the walker. And this has been a real long road, and I'm really excited about that.
Great. Time to take him to Costco so he can do the grocery shopping again.
Yeah, that would be nice. And when does he start the laundry again?
I know, that's right. See, that's good. Now that you're better, I love it. So I'm Joshua. I'm actually a native California. I've lived in a lot of different places. I'm sitting in my office here at the Loyola Marymount University campus where the AJRCA holds its offices. And the most amazing thing that I've seen, and I just went up north for a couple days, and driving through the Grapevine, we saw the mountains just completely blossomed with the orange wildflowers, not the poppies, just orange wildflowers. It was like the entire mountain was painted with orange, and then you look closer and there's specks of purple. But the most beautiful thing is the peach tree that we planted for when our daughter, who's now 17 and is going to be graduating high school and going off to college, when she was born. And that peach tree has had blossoms and it's had some fruit, which usually gets eaten by the squirrels. But because of the rains, it has blossomed in such an extraordinary, radiant way. Peach blossoms are just beautiful. They're purple, they're small and flowery. It's so amazing. And we're just hoping that that also brings a bountiful harvest. And it's kind of like, it is symbolic because it's also our daughter who's been kind of like blossoming in our home and is about to launch in the world. So so that's really, really great. So thank you all for sharing. I did notice that a couple of us put into the chat some prayers for those that we would like to acknowledge as we're in the midst of our learning. So we're just gonna sort of acknowledge those and hold on to them. Still a little bit of explanation in the class. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to bring up the syllabus and then we'll do a little learning together, okay? So, so here we go. Here's the syllabus. Hopefully you saw all of this in the email, but let's just kind of like review what it is that we're accomplishing in our class. Okay. So we called this How to Change Your Mind, and it's all about change and adaptation. And as we're going to learn through the sessions together, not only by employing rabbinic and biblical texts to understand what does change look like from the Jewish tradition, but really kind of in also in our modern day, and we call some of the texts that we'll be studying, even though they have resonance of kind of like Jewish texts, they're still very recent in their sort of construction. They're highly influenced by modern thinking. And also we'll have modern writers who are very also very interested in the subject about change. And while the primary focus is going to be about self-change in our class, it's really bigger than just what we feel internally and the conflict and tension or the questions that we ask about whether or not we're really, capable of changing in the learning that and that we explore in our class today. But this is one of those classes where, for those who are interested in the physical sciences, physics, or the biological sciences and watching evolution, right? There are these sort of like experiences of change and growth that happen in the universe, and we, as a part of the universe, are, of course, we are a part of that change. I mean, we feel that in our own ways physically, but what does it mean for us to expand beyond our own understanding of what change means in our own like everyday lives to what does it mean in a cosmic sense? So the goal is, by the time that we get to the end of our 8 sessions, to start thinking about cosmic change. What does the Jewish tradition have to say about it? And even more so, how do we as individuals, as communities, respond to that? Since there's a lot of talk about change, right? I mean, that's the introduction. You see this paragraph. Talk about being mindful. Talk about change management. There's books galore about how to change in organizations and stuff like that. And with all of that talk about it, there's a difficulty, right? It's not easy. So what is it that makes it difficult? And I hope that as we're all committed to learning together, because that's part of change in and of itself, that we're going to learn how to be better changers. Okay. So take a look. We're going to talk about it from the negative today. We're going to talk about the opposite of change, right? We're going to see, is there really such a thing as like not changing? And is that actually possible? So then we're going to talk about, through the following weeks, we'll talk about changing yourself and sort of what the tradition has to say about what does it mean as an individual to experience change. Okay. We call that in another way tikkun atzmi. So tikkun, as in the word in Hebrew, tikkun olam, you've heard that as a popular word. Tikkun, which means kind of correction or changing, that is also applied to individual personal change, tikkun atzmi. Okay, and we'll talk about that. Then we talk about what it means for a community, a group of people, a collective to change. And I've turned that under responsibility. So think about the word response as an action, but a behavior, a mindset. And that kind of like quality does, in some respect, require a certain amount of change. And what that change is from biblical and modern perspectives, we're going to talk about. And then we're going to talk about like sort of like the visions of like, the idea. I have a favorite song that I love. I learned it when my kids were young, because it was by a musical group called They Might Be Giants. And they did, for a while, they did kids music. And they did one called about the numbers. So they wrote songs all about like 0 through 10. And the one that they did for number 1 was called There's Only One Everything. And it's a wonderful song about what if there's such a thing as everything and there's only one of it, right? Then what does that really mean? And Judaism has a very clear sense in our prayer, Aleinu l'shabech. We say it's up to us that we bring all together everything that is disparate and broken and fractured in the world into a sense of oneness, because we have a belief in a one God. And so what does it mean for us to do that? Is it possible that the universe has that kind of unanimity, uniformity, universality? Okay. And then we'll conclude with, is change possible? Okay, so that's a little bit about the class. Let me just sort of stop before we go into our learning. Is there anything that anybody was expecting out of this class that didn't feel like, we're going to be covering it? It's okay to say it. You're like, well, gee, I was really expecting that. Sherry, what were you expecting? Because I want to make sure that.
Quick question, when you mentioned about this class, you also mentioned the Michael Pollan book.
Yes.
Are you going to talk about that kind of stuff?
Or
it was just the
yes.
emphasis?
No, yes, absolutely. So no, I think so, because when we talk about, as the idea of the class is that we use ancient biblical tradition and like Jewish text to address this. But Michael Pollan, who wrote this wonderful book called How to Change Your Mind, and really he's taking it from the perspective of something that is really on the forefront of thinking about introducing different kinds of like, whether they're synthetic or natural, mind-altering substances to enable you to go through a process of change. What does that mean? And we're going to talk about that because that's a very crucial thing. So I'm glad that you brought it up. But it's not going to be the mainstay of the class. So I'm glad that you brought that. Yeah. Anybody else? Great. Yes, Ruth B.
You know what I'm going to talk about in advance? Which my focus is always on the feminine, and how can we bring the feminine and the feminist perspective to all these male biblical perspectives. And hopefully you will be bringing some perspectives from a feminist perspective also.
I thank you. That's absolutely great. And also, I think we need to use models, feminine models as well, because there is such a really great point, and I'm going to make a note of it, because I don't think that it's not intuitive, unfortunately, because of the amount of material that comes from the tradition, which may have a sort of male-centered focus of understanding what change is all about. Now, the one thing that I'm going to lean on for all of us, as we notice that this class is exclusively of me, the teacher, is participated by women. That you help me bring that, because there are probably understandings of change that might be more nuanced in a feminist perspective that I'm not able to bring up. But I will thank you for saying it and bring it, and it's welcome. Okay. Great. Anything else? Love it. All right, so let us begin with a prayer for our study. So here it goes. Yes, Jeannie, I see you.
I hope you can hear me. I just
can.
lost the whole picture.
You're good.
Okay. What I'm dealing with is not, I feel like I'm disengaging, that I'm so distraught about a lot of things I hear in the news and hear politicians saying that I'm kind of withdrawing from it, and I'm sort of losing hope in humanity, which is I'm by nature a very positive person, but I'm just feeling really like things are never going to change. And I'm worried for myself, on top of worried about the world.
Thank you. I wrote it down. I'm writing all this stuff down. The reason why it's good is it's important to do that is while that can actually occupy our thoughts. What we hope, the goal of this class is to help us put our thoughts, which seem to be perhaps unending and persevering, that of our concern of the world around us, and that can stifle us, right? We can feel a sense of inability to change because of how difficult it is to see any kind of pathway forward in the world that we live in today. So hopefully, we'll instill some hope in you, Jeannie. Okay, you're still here, so that's good. All right, so for all of us, we're going to say our prayer, and for those who are new to learning with us, you'll just join along and you'll see how we do all this, and just note, let me make sure that we mute everybody, because our Zoom platform is not really great for collective singing. Here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Misheberach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishe berachim otenu mekor habracha that I'm floating for souls in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us sing. Amen. Prayers of healing, right? The very important message that we communicate and convey in the class about change is that loved ones that we care about who are suffering can change, that healing can come, that a sense of peace and equanimity is possible, and our collective learning and our thoughts are important contributions to that. So thank you for the entire list of names that everybody added. And just know that that our prayers collectively each and every week are an affirmation, definitely that that things can change. Okay, so I want to show you something, and then I'll take the screen off. So take a look. Okay, so you see this, right? These are just antonyms for change. Do you know how many synonyms there are for change? If you look them up, there's hundreds. So many things can describe change, but the antonyms, the opposite, believe it or not, are not nearly as colorful or as extensive or as descriptive as they might be in comparison to how many synonyms there are. So just take a look. Here's 5: set, fixed, stubborn, stable, frozen. Okay? Anybody like what if you were to think of an antonym to change? You could try it with one word, but maybe that's the challenge, is that there's a lot of words that you need to use. So if we're talking about how to change, what is the opposite of that? Is there something? So Pam wrote in like along the word of frozen, paralyzed, right? Paralysis is literally like and it's not only a paralysis of physical experience, but it could be a mental kind of an emotional paralysis. That's wonderful. Any other words? Go ahead and just chime in. Stuck, right? Lori put in stuck. That's an interesting word, right? Stuck is the sound of it is kind of also it's distasteful, right? It's like, oh, yuck. I hear yuck and stuck. So any other words?
Would
Nothing.
insular with insular, like being, I'm dealing with an issue with that right now is, just self-centered or just too centered. Would that
Such
be
an interesting, no,
appropriate?
no, you said such an interesting thing. You said too centered, right? Like, so there's a sense that like the opposite of change is it's not a lack of something, but it's actually an overabundance of something. It's too much of something. It's so overwhelming. It's like trying to drink water from a fire hose, right? There's so much of it. It is impossible to sort of take it in. And insularity is so, this is like the paralysis thing, right? It's so all consuming that you're unable. Is that what you mean? That's an interesting thing. Rigid, solid, very good words. Okay.
Thank you.
So I want you to hold on to this, right? And I want to sort of keep going back to this concept, right? Don't worry, we have good qualities. It's not, there's good, well, good qualities that prevent change. Yes. And also there are good qualities that are associated with change, and there are negative qualities with change. So it's not about good or bad here. And it's very important for us to kind of like try and decouple change with good and paralysis or fixed nature with bad. But there is a quality that we have to enter into that changes is a constant, which you've heard, right? It's constantly happening. That is part of the universal experience of existence. And also, what does it mean when either we are subject to a sense of fixedness or paralysis or immobility, and when do we actively choose to be immobile, maybe for our own benefit, right? Like, let's just say it, right? If walking on the street and you don't change your pace and you walk right into the middle of the street when the car is coming the other way, that would be a bad example of change if you were to say of not changing. Okay. You need to change in that moment, right? And imagine the other way, right? Like if you are going, in your motion and you stopped all of a sudden because you were worried about you're in the middle of the street and you were worried about whatever you're going to have for dinner tonight, and you didn't change because you're right in the middle of the street, and all of a sudden there comes the traffic the other way. Well, you put yourself in peril. Okay. So you have to think a little bit about change not as being a quality of good or bad. It's not a moral it's not a moral distinction. It is a state of being distinction. So with that, let's jump in with a couple of introductory things about the fact that like change has been a part of the story. And what is it that if we see change, if we recognize that change is, then what is the feeling? What is it that we're concerned with when there isn't change, or when things feel the same, or when we want to change something, even though it's not something that, on the surface we really desire, right? In other words, like sometimes being in uncomfortable places is something that compels us to change, right? We want to get away from discomfort. But there are other times, like suffering, the negative experience is so vital to our being and our understanding of our being, that we have to endure that, right? Nobody wants to experience loss in a very like personal way, but the benefit of that experience makes you perhaps a more rich and more deep and more thoughtful human being. Okay, this is what we're going to play with. So we're going to play with first the very first chapters of the book of Genesis. Linda, you're at the top of my screen, which is always a good place for you. Would you like to read for us? This is from the end of the book of Genesis. It is the final verses of the book of the portion of Genesis, and it is the introduction of the story of Noah. Would you read for us, please?
Yahweh saw how great was human wickedness on earth, how every plan devised by the human mind was nothing but evil all the time. And Yahweh regretted having made humankind on earth. With a sorrowful heart, Yahweh said, I will blot out from earth humankind whom I created, humans together with beasts, creeping things, and birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. But Noah found favor with Yahweh.
Okay, so I'm just going to say a couple things, and I'm going to take it off screen so they can see each other and discuss. I want to take a closer reading of the text. I want you to take note before we go into this. So this is a story about God, right? So what does it mean that God is experiencing a change? What is the impetus for the experience of change? What is God's appraisal of the human being? Okay, and is that appraisal of a human being dynamic, or is that also fixed and unchanging? And the last piece is a question that you should think about: why is this in our Bible at the very beginning? So there are so many different stories that we could tell about how humanity came to be, and this is right in the beginning. Okay, so let's go back and reflect on the questions. Okay, so God is changing here. Why is God changing, and what does it mean that, like, what is God changing for? So let's try to build that up together. Who would like to share? I mean, I could certainly lecture on it, but I would love to hear, all of us. What is it like? What's going on, Sherry? Unmute.
Could you put the text back up?
Sure.
Well, God
Go
was
ahead, Sherry.
pissed. God was pissed off.
God was pissed off. Interesting language, very technical term, by the way. Well, it's interesting, right? So as we're looking at it closely, what is God? So it's so interesting. It says, with a sorrowful heart, okay? With a sorrowful heart. So first of all, hey, human beings, how do we know what's inside the heart of God? Did that become a special skill that we have? Right? And if it's inside God and God is giving us this story, what does it mean for God to be telling us, I was sorrowful. I was feeling a sense of incompletion and uncertainty in this moment. Okay, there's that. All right. Now you got Sherry's like, beyond as sorrowful as an emotion, you have God is God pissed off? Or is God just simply God's remorseful that we have, right? It says, because it says ki nihamti, right? Nihamti is an interesting word in Hebrew. It's similarly the word that we use for comfort, right? But it's also the word that says I'm upset. Okay. So Sherry, you got it right. I'm upset. I'm upset that I made human beings. Okay. So is God upset at human beings, or is God upset in God's self? Right. So we're about to experience a change in God. Okay? And it comes from a sorrowful heart and a feeling of remorse that God is feeling inside of God's self. What else do we see? You're gonna have to raise your hands, Marlene. Go ahead and unmute. Unmute, Marlene, please.
I'm looking at it from the perspective of God managing expectations of what God intended, and then what is the capacity of the world in which was created. Like, I guess I'm looking at it from the perspective of, you create something, you have high expectations for it, and it's disappointing because it can't always meet your expectations. So you get frustrated
Amazing.
and pissed off.
Amazing point, right? Like, if you're God, right, which we're not, but like if you're God and you're like, I'm creating the world, right? I'm creating this thing, and I've created it. Well, and I'm perfect, so why wouldn't I create the perfect thing? Why wouldn't I create the perfect thing? Right? And here we are learning a very powerful lesson that we experience a letdown of our expectations, right? Like, even God experiences a letdown of expectations. And when people, if we're gonna, let's quickly turn it inside to the personal experience, right? When a person is feeling ambivalence towards changing, it's often connected to what is the expectation of the experience as it is happening. Very nice point. Sandy.
I was thinking on the same line as that, but also that he doesn't have any control over it. You think that God has control over it, but had he known all of this, it's this am I all knowing, all powerful? Look what I created, and what does it do?
Amazing, right? What an important message. So I'm going to take it off screen. I hope that's okay. But let's just say, so here's the thing, right? And we talk about theology at length when it comes to this. The only theology that we're going to bring up in this moment is what is our definition of God in the Jewish tradition, the biblical tradition based on this text. Our understanding of the biblical God, which is by necessity, it is only going to be through our interpretation of that. We don't understand the full totality of what that force of life and creation in the universe really is. Okay, but our best understanding of it is one in which we have a recognition that of something incomplete, right? So it's a sense of God's self, thinking that it's perfect and recognizing that even it's not perfect. That's what Candy's saying. Even the God of perfection realizes that it's not perfect, or say it differently, right? It's saying that the definition of God is the understanding of its imperfection, if you will, a sense of self-awareness. What an interesting kind of definition of what God is. Something that feels very difficult for some of us because we want to believe in we want to understand a sense of God as being more powerful than we are. But if the power that makes up God is also subject to change, right? Then what does that make us? That might be the challenge behind that. Any other thoughts about this?
I have a thought, Sharon. I at Sunday's service, the Yom HaShoah, we sang a song called "Even When God Is Silent," and it tells me now, and it's very moving that God maintained his silence and watched through many times in our history. And this seminar coming right on top of the Holocaust Memorial is very appropriate, if you will, because he was now willing to break his silence and intervene with what obviously was it wasn't an imperfect creation, but the creation acted on its own and became imperfect, maybe. I don't know, but the idea that God is silent almost all the time until he decides to intervene, first of all, personifies him, and second of all, makes us conscious of the fact that we are on our own most of the time. Does that make sense?
Beautiful, right? Well, I think, yeah, Kate, I see you. Hold on just a second. What I think, first of all, it is Yom HaShoah today. Thank you very, very much for bringing that into focus. And one of the major theological challenges was, if God intervened in other times in history, why didn't God intervene now, when the greatest amount of suffering that humanity imposed upon other members of the human race? How can we deal with that? Hold on a second. I'm just gonna mute our dear
Okay.
friend
Hi,
Linda, because she is talking with us on the
fine,
phone.
Eric. You are working with Get Home Health.
Hold on just a second. There we go. All right, we got it. So, so that's a really important point. So the question, so a lot of people will say, like, well, where was God there? But then, Sharon, in your second part, you're saying, look, it's that sort of like question of silence, and is the silence something that also sort of is a reflection of human empowerment, right? Like, is it that God was really relying upon human beings? Because it's not that it's not that human beings were created imperfectly, right? Which is a Christian concept, but it's actually human beings were created perfectly, but they have the free will to choose to change that thinking.
Perfect.
And it's in that capacity to change that brings about such horrific things like the Holocaust, right? Good. Kate, what would you like to share, please?
That the God who could see things only as black and white, that, humankind was all evil. This was a time when God changed. He was not forgiving. He didn't even have hope that these people, that humankind could change. He just blotted everything out. And with Noah and the this is Sister Coretta Kent's painting of Genesis. With Noah, he brought the rainbow, and that was, I don't know if it was the first covenant between God and humankind, that he would never do that again, that he would have hope and be forgiving, and allow us to be flawed, but always strive for change and teshuva.
Yeah. I think it's a beautiful thing. The question is, because the story of God throughout the Torah, and I looked to a wonderful book called God: A Biography by Jack Miles, in which we understand that really the Bible, specifically the Torah, the first 5 books, are all about, like, the story of God in sort of the understanding the universe as has been translated by human beings. And so it really is this important transformation that there is more to the story, what you've added after this moment, right? When God says to God's self, no matter how I'm feeling about humanity, I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to do that again. Okay. And that in and of itself has its own lesson at another point. But thank you for sharing that. Any other comments, or let's move on to the next one. Everybody's okay? I want to move on. I want to show
Well,
you.
I'm sorry, Rabbi Joshua. Ruth
Sure.
Golansky has had her hand up for
Oh.
quite some time.
I couldn't see. Ruth,
I know,
please.
and that's why I'm telling you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm gonna
Ruth, you
get
got it.
bigger.
Ruth, do you know how to do it? Just so, like, I won't miss it, because I've got so many, like, ways to do this. There's a little place under reactions to raise your hand. And if you do that, I won't miss you. But anyway, anytime if I miss anybody, just grab me.
Okay,
It is by a complete accident if I miss you.
so I'd like to look at this God that we're talking about from the feminine point of view. And I'd like to think about not all women are kind, not all women are forgiving, not all women are not vengeful. However, I think that more than less are less vengeful. And for me, this vengeful God is at the very beginning. And this God says that, oh, I won't do this again. But if we look ahead, which I guess we're stuck with where we are, this God has done this numerous times throughout the whole of the Bible. And so I'm just looking at this God as taking power, the full power. And although there is a feeling of remorse, it changes, and yet it doesn't change. It changes and it continues to move ahead and go back, reverts back to vengeful thoughts and to not looking. There's one person as God sees it, as Yud-Heh-Vav sees it, which we're moving towards, which is Noah. But it's very hard for me in my this year, in the only life that I know. And I know there's great evil because I lived in South Africa. I know what that evil is. And I know that there's evil here in this country and in every country, but I also know that we don't hear enough of the amazing goodness, what we saw and heard in the Shoah about how many people there were who rescued people at risks to their own lives. And there are so many people who do so many good deeds, many of them privately, but we also see and hear about them. And so for me, this particular issue about change, I don't see enough change in this Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh that I'd like to see at the very beginning of our story.
Yeah, wonderful. I really think so. I want to go back to the point. So your first point and your last point, right, is that in the snapshot of our record, which is known as the Torah, it has a description of this God identity, which does feel like it's dynamic, and there might be some changes. I mean, we can't point to changing moments, but there is this sort of underlying, almost a tacit acceptance that vengeance is a quality that is permissible in the domain of divinity. And if it's permissible in the domain of divinity, then the human being might have the impulse to consider that to be acceptable behavior itself. I don't know if you said it that way, Ruth, but I think that is the way to read what your comment is, because. And it's not necessarily about feminine and masculine, but if there is a sense, because as you identified, that people can be vengeful and people can be cruel and people can be, vindictive and can be unforgiving. And it's not, I mean, we might exhibit more qualities one or the other, but it's a human quality. But our issue here is our understanding of God. If this is supposed to be the book that's supposed to help us lift up to be our best humanity, best versions of humanity, this sort of recurring thread would remind us that change, if it's the lesson of the moment is not that if God changes, then we can change. The lesson of the moment is, yeah, God changes, but look at what it took for God to change. And are there examples of where God changes because of dramatic gestures of kindness and goodness, which, as you alluded in your comment to, there are those examples, and that's exactly what we need to look for. So there is that. Hold on to that, because I think that's the sort of like text that we bring ourselves into today. Okay, we're going to continue to look at our biblical and our rabbinic ancestry to continue to study it, and then we'll figure out how we apply that and modify that in a way that makes it meaningful for us today. Rabbi Laura, would you like to read? It's a very short piece.
Yes.
We
I
just
see
finished
that.
Passover. Yeah.
Beginning with change may be inevitable.
Yes.
Change may be inevitable, but when is the power to change beyond your control? But Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh stiffened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not agree to let them go. Pharaoh said to him, "Be gone from me. Take care not to see me again, for the moment you look upon my face, you shall die." And Moses replied, "You've spoken rightly. I shall not see your face again." And that's
wonderful.
From Exodus 10:27 through 29.
Thank you. Now, if everybody understands this is the conclusion of the 9th plague. Okay, there was just this this example of darkness, and we've heard the recurring theme. I just grabbed this, but the recurring theme of the Exodus story is very important because one of the definitions of Pharaoh is Pharaoh's intractability. Right, the plagues continue to evolve because in their severity, because the Pharaoh cannot make a change of heart. And because the Pharaoh doesn't have a change of heart, doesn't change his mind, that the plagues become so overwhelming and so overpowering and God's power is so determinative that Pharaoh has nothing but to let the people go. Here is the moment in which the Pharaoh says, "Go, be gone. I don't want you to see me. And don't look at me again, because the next time we see each other, I'm really going to mess you up." And Moses is like, "You got it, right? We're not going to see each other again." That's true. No threats about that. Which, by the way, Pharaoh does show up at the sea after the people have been, they've fled Egypt and they're on the way crossing the sea towards freedom. The Pharaoh and his soldiers pursue after them, and they are swallowed up in the sea. In other words, the Pharaoh does make a change, right? He's changing all over the place. But what does it mean in our text to have a story that says that change there may be a point when change is impossible? That, like, even if you wanted to change, you wouldn't be able to do that. That's one of the readings that I have from this text. And I'm curious what you would think. We just finished doing the Passover story. We finished talking about Passover. We talk about liberation and freedom. And sometimes, I don't know, around your Seder tables, we talk about Pharaoh. But I want to talk about Pharaoh in the context of our learning here. What does it mean for us to have a story that's going to talk about how to change your mind, knowing that in the background, there is this story that is the most important story that we tell our children and our grandchildren. And we say that there was a person who was unwilling to change, and look at what happened to him. What's the message of that? Laura, what did you think? You were kind of starting with that, something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, for me, the message is much more about the impact that his not changing had upon the people's willingness to finally do something about it to the best of their ability. How does Pharaoh's inability to change ultimately impact Moses and then impact everyone else's ability to go on. So I think sometimes, and I don't remember who was talking earlier about how, maybe it was Linda, about the fear that we have right now in the world about the intractable, unchangeable people who are unwilling to move an inch out of their stuck place. How does that impact on what we need to do in order to make change happen? That was my
Wonderful.
thought.
No,
Just
that's a great, wonderful comment, right? So the comment is, it's really like, what is the impact? The impact of change is not on the self so much as it is the consequences of the world around us. And we happen to be living in a world and a time when we have the impression that there are people who are empowered, and their refusal to change is causing us discomfort. So we feel a responsibility, just like the Israelites felt a responsibility to speak out against it. And that impact of that tension is something that we are constantly in flow with. So I love the comment. I don't want to let's hold on to it, because I think that we're gonna have to play with that with our learning together. Marlene.
So somewhere in this, change may be impossible and the irretractability of things, I feel like acceptance lives. And I feel like acceptance allows us to move forward despite the impossibility of change. I mean, I feel like there is a place of acceptance in there that allows us to be free.
Yeah, wonderful, right? So one of the things that we're, and which sometimes feels like, and it's why people are resistant to change. And I would just say, like, that's also, think about this on a global universal level, right? Why is nature, somehow, mountains aren't easily moved. Okay. The reason that mountains aren't easily moved is because there isn't something more compelling and powerful to move it. But bring in an earthquake, and all of a sudden that mountain is moving. And so bring it to then go back into the self, the sense of acceptance is in one way a feeling that, like, there is no other choice but to accept. And that feels like a defeat. Or what I think you're saying, Marlene, is that the acceptance is an act of change that is empowering. And that you have, so it's
It goes
an
to like
embrace.
the serenity prayer.
Exactly, right? Like, I can embrace that change and become something more as a result. Very good. Any other questions, comments, interesting stuff? Sherry, was that
I
you?
think that's
Yes.
where we as individuals need the tools to skipping ahead to Musar, the tools to, be able to accept and not feel bad,
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm gonna help you finish the sentence, because you're saying something right, and I know you're trying to articulate it. It's that you said the most important thing. We need tools. We need tools because, not because we're incapable of change, not because change is impossible. Think of, like, we can have the perception that we can be pharaohs, right? We have that capacity. We have and that's what, if you will, God saw in the Noah story, that said the world is filled with pharaohs, and they don't see any reason to change. God regrets the fact that human beings have that power. So God is going to say, I'm going to give them something so powerful that's going to completely, like, wipe them off the face of the planet, except for this one guy, right? Now, I like Ruth's comment. Ruth, I don't want you to ever feel like I'm ignoring you, because the point is, that's only one way to read the story. It's the story that we have. But what we all have at the end, whether it comes from a sense of of despair or intractability or refusal to change, or it comes from a place of saying that like there's a need and a desire and we really want to, but we don't have the tools in which to make that change. That's what you're saying, Cheryl. We want to, but we just don't know how. That's why we have this thing called the Jewish tradition to help us.
Called what?
Well, we have the Jewish tradition with all of this text and wisdom. We have a lot of lived wisdom of people who have confronted the same question, and we're smart enough to write it down to remind us when we're like in the future, when we're in a place when we feel like we don't have the right tools available to us to do something. That's what I think we've got. Is that, yeah? Did I do okay for you? Yeah, good. All right. With the last few moments, I think we've studied this before. This is one of my favorite rabbinic texts. It is complicated. I want you to understand, like there's the end of the text, okay? The end of the text may make you wriggle a little bit. And that's there in part, okay, to make you wriggle. But the point of the text is to demonstrate what does it mean to overcome the impulse to make bad decisions, right? What does it mean? What if you could change the world so that everything was just perfect, right? And everybody was kind and everything was understanding and everybody, everybody had enough of everything. What would it look like? Okay. So the rabbis had this imagination, like if the world was perfect this way. And so they have this text to share with us. Okay. Sherry, you feel like reading?
Sure. Where are we?
What if we could eliminate?
What if we could eliminate the impulse that motivates us to make poor decisions? The Gemara makes a parenthetical observation. Rav Hanina said, learn from this that the seal of the Holy One, blessed be he, is truth. In response to the indication of divine acceptance, they observed a fast for 3 days and 3 nights, and he delivered the evil inclination to them.
Stop for just a moment. Stop for just a moment. Let's parse that out because that's actually really important stuff. Okay. So this is a digression. It's in the middle of a question, conversation about like, it's on Yom Kippur and what's entailed in God forgiving us for our sins. Okay. And in the middle of that, you have this like teaching, which says, you should remember that God's seal, like when God has an imprimatur on the world, it's truth. Okay. So that should be truth with a capital T. Okay. And so in the response to this, like understanding of divine acceptance, they're like, if things aren't the way that we want them to be, we're going to fast for 3 days and 3 nights. We're going to persuade you to change your mind about the thing that we did wrong. And we're going to do it by fasting for 3 days and 3 nights. And God says, okay, I'm giving you the evil impulse, right? The very thing that caused you to do the thing that I don't approve of, the thing that is a betrayal of my truth. Here, you can have it. Okay, go ahead.
A form of a fiery lion cub came forth from the chamber of the Holy of Holies. Zechariah the prophet said to the Jewish people, this is the evil inclination for idol worship, as it is stated in the verse that refers to this event. And he said, this is the evil one. The use of the word this indicates that the evil inclination was perceived in a physical form.
Okay, so just very quickly parsing it out, right? So this is rabbinic imagination. And the rabbis are imagining that this thing called the evil impulse, it's called the Yetzer Hara. You've heard that before, right? The Yetzer Hara is manifest physically in a lion cub. The little lion cub, it's like coming out. Now, is a lion cub as fierce as a full-grown lion? No, right? Is it potentially dangerous? Absolutely. Okay, so its physical manifestation is important. So now go ahead.
When they caught hold of it, one of its hairs fell and it let out a shriek of pain that was heard for 400 parasangs. They said, what should we do to kill it? Perhaps, heaven forfend, they will have mercy upon him from heaven, since it cries out so much. The prophet said to them, throw it into a container made of lead and seal the opening with lead, since lead absorbs sound. As it is stated And he said, this is the evil one. And he cast it down into the midst of the measure, and he cast a stone of lead upon its opening.
All right, stop right there. Let me just sort of like, again, you bring it, right? Just so you're not confused. I think this is like fascinating. Like this stuff, these guys are so creative, right? So basically what happens, there's this fiery lion cub, and it's, it's dangerous, but like not too dangerous, because human beings are stronger than little lion cubs. Okay, so they catch one of it and they pluck a little hair out of it, just one hair, one of the hairs. And when they try and catch one of its hairs, it lets out this shriek of pain. In other words, the evil impulse is so sensitive that one hair being plucked from its body lets sound be heard throughout the universe. Okay, so then they said, what should we do with this thing, right? Because what if while it's crying out and it's suffering, God has mercy on it and says, don't do that, right? So they say, we can't kill it, we're going to put it in a lead container. So they put it in a lead container. Go ahead, they followed this advice.
They followed this advice and were freed of the evil inclination for idol worship. When they saw that the evil inclination for idol worship was delivered into their hands as they requested, the sages said, since it is an auspicious time, let us pray also concerning the evil inclination for sin in the area of sexual relationships. They prayed and it was delivered into their hands. Zechariah the prophet said to them, see and understand that if you kill this evil inclination, the world will be destroyed. Because the result, there will also no longer be any desire to procreate. They followed his warning, and instead of killing the evil inclination, they imprisoned it for 3 days.
All right, so stop right there for a second. Stop. Okay, great. So now, so what's happened, right? So they catch the evil inclination. So in their imagination, they're like, we're going to get rid of our impulse to do bad things. We're going to get rid of anything that prevents us from being fully capable of living in the world that the perfect world that God has created, and our behavior in it. And they've got it. And they captured it, and they put it in a lead thing, and they kept it there, and they're like, we're doing so good, let's ask for every other bad thing that happens. And they've got it. And so it says, listen, it says, if you kill this, the world will be destroyed. Okay, so you can't just get rid of it, because if you do that, then the world will cease to exist. So how did they know that this was true? Because they put it into a prison, another lead bowl, if you will, for 3 days. Okay, go ahead. At that time,
people searched for a fresh egg throughout all of Eretz Israel and could not find one. Since the inclination to reproduce was quashed, the chickens stopped laying eggs. They said, what should we do? If we kill it, the world will be destroyed. If we pray for half, only half its power be annulled, nothing will be achieved, because heaven does not grant half gifts, only whole gifts. What did they do? They gouged out its eyes, effectively limiting its power, and set it free. And this was effective to the extent that a person is no longer aroused to commit incest with his close relatives.
So there's the unseemly thing, right? The rabbis are trying to figure out, they're like, okay, how do we know that this happened? Because in our communities, there's no incest, right? Which unfortunately, did not historically bear out. And it's a terrible dilemma. On the other hand, what you're trying to understand here is that they try to capture the evil inclination. They try to solve a world where they said, what if we just like teach and educate? What if we create a world in which there's no bad things, that nobody's going to change to do bad stuff? They're only going to change to do good stuff. Isn't that what the goal of the world is that we should only change to do good stuff? Well, they tried to do that, and they said, if you get rid of it, then not even a chicken is going to lay an egg, because the need to procreate is something that is inspired by the inclination to have, a little bit of power, to exert a little bit of power over others. And it's part of the sort of natural order of things. This is what human beings do, and do animals, even chickens. So now they say, well, what can we do? Because if we can't get rid of the very thing, like, it's supposed to make our world good, then how shall we live? Do we pray for half of it? And they said, no, 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 we can't pray for half of it because God doesn't grant halves. I love that. You can't, there's no halvesies. There's no halvesies in God. Right? That's the way that you play that little teaching. Okay. So what do? They gouge out its eyes so that it's blind. It's not like it's picking you. Everybody is subject to it. And the way that it happens is not necessarily deliberate. It's not on purpose. But if you get caught in a place where you are subject to the evil inclination, it is only because it is a natural experience of being, and it is nothing intentional or deliberate to you. And how did they know that this was effective? Because somebody who would feel the inclination to cause harm to one of their family members physically, that would no longer exist. Well, I would amend the Gemara to have a different example if that were the case, but this was written 2,000 years ago, and that was their best understanding of the case at the time. At the time. So, okay. What is going on in this text, and how does it relate to change? According to this text, can you change? Can you change your mind? Is it possible? Kate, you're nodding yes. Yes, do you want to add or just, yes, of course you could change. Sherry, go ahead. If you want to say something, go unmute. You have to unmute yourself. There you go. Go ahead, Kate.
Well, everything changes or dies is what I was taught is one of the 5 rules of life. And change is the one constant in life. So I think it's that with mindfulness, awareness, and radical acceptance that we need to proceed.
Very nice, right? Like if you were to summarize it, right, of course, like the things that make change. But according to this text, the question is whether or not this text gives us a sense that that change is possible. So Sherry, did you want to say something? Oh, okay. You were about to say something and then
I've never heard this story.
I know, right? You guys, you know, let's love your neighbors yourself. This is also part of the story because they were trying to answer a question, right? Here were people thousands of years ago trying to ask the very same questions that we have. Is it possible to change? And they're like, what if we had, yes, of course it's possible to change. Well, then is it possible to change in such a way that there would never be any harm that would be caused to other people, or that I would be even, seduced or persuaded or compelled to cause harm to another person? No, it's impossible. You could try, right? You could try that, but if you do that, then the world will cease to exist. This is their thought, their thinking. So the question is it possible to have a world without this inclination to, I don't know, self-preservation, to change for the better? Rabbi Laura?
My only thought was that this is not so much about whether or not change is possible, as much as it is about accepting the duality of the world, and that without this evil inclination, how do we know what the good inclination is? And so sort of looking at it more from that perspective, because I think that we can't live in the world and think that change is impossible, because it happens constantly in nature, in humans, all around us. But I think this is much more about how do we deal with the fact that we cannot get rid of an evil inclination as long as we have the opportunity for the good one.
Beautiful, right? Like if we're gonna go back into, if you will, binaries, right? Like good and evil. And then we're gonna say, like, you can't have, I do this with my children. I'll share a little personal thing, right? I talk to my kids about highs and lows, right? Just, I don't say good or bad, highs and lows, right? And they're like, oh, that was not everything they could do. Like, I get that you're like, 27 years old and not quite, I'm just kidding. My kids are teenagers, so it's more likely that they talk like that, right? And they're communicating. But nonetheless, right, when they talk about their days of being low, it's like you can't have a low unless you have a high, right? And if they come in and they're like, today was amazing, blah, blah, blah," and it's not that I want to bring them down. I was like, well, if that's your high, what's your, less than high, right? Like, what made that the highest thing? So what Rabbi Laura is bringing into the case and what's being sort of, reaffirmed in this text is that as much as we have an impulse to change towards goodness, the change towards goodness is only going to be possible in the context of understanding that there is always going to be some kind of impulse in order to detract, to delimit, to paralyze, to freeze, to stick, to stabilize the world. Even though we know that change is a constant, like Kate said, right? What does it mean? Such an interesting kind of human dilemma. If we are part of a universe that is constantly changing, why is it so hard for us to accept the change that happens? Why did they want to put this thing into a lead container so that they could isolate it? What was the impulse there? It
Fear.
hurts. Yeah, fear. It hurts. There's suffering. Because part of the experience of change is that there is an experience of discomfort, of displacement, of disorientation. So the blindness of the creature at the end may very well also be the blindness that we have in order to recognize that if there is harm that we cause in our lack of change or desire to change or whatever, that maybe it isn't so moralistic after all. And it's just a part of existence. That this change concept is as much part of the resistance to change is as much part of our existence as the desire to change, which are both qualities of change in and of themselves. Now that I hope that doesn't feel too simplistic, but that to me is an excellent place to begin our learning. Because once we go through this text each and every time, and we start talking about it from a psychological perspective, all of us have family members that we would like to change. Maybe we would like to change, but we can't because our family members are so stubborn, and so therefore we have to be stubborn, whatever it is, right? But our experience of this ebb and flow is better understood when we are a part of it, which means a better recognition that the change that happens or doesn't happen isn't a values-based change, but it's simply a state of being. It's part of being human. And the quality of understanding of our humanity is, I think, the goal of a course like this. Marlene.
I just have a question. Isn't the only person we can change is ourselves?
Ha. Well,
It's just a question. You don't have to answer it. It's just, I always say, that's what I always say. It's the only person I can change is myself. So I can only take responsibility for my own behavior.
Yeah.
So it's just a question. I don't know the answer.
Yeah. I think that's where we're gonna, spend some time learning.
Okay,
Because
good.
I think we in the latter parts of our class, we're going to talk about communal change, collective change. And we're going to talk about, which is, we certainly feel, strongly, and it's necessary. There are so many moments in which we celebrate. And then also we're extremely frustrated when we open up the news. I wish Jeannie was here. And this poor kid, right, who was shot. Do you see that in the news today? Poor kid who was shot by a man, right? Talk about that. How can we not feel a sense of responsibility to change that? Right. And the question is, is it so can we change that? And then also, this sort of global question, right? what does it mean to really do global change? Is it, is it a piecemeal step-by-step process? Is it a, think an idea and then it becomes the reality, which is one of the texts that we'll study? There's many of dimensions that of what we think about this. And participating in the conversation is a good first step. But I think probably aligning ourselves in what works is good too. Rabbi Laura, Sherry?
Oh, I just wanted to say, of course, the only person that we can actually change is ourselves. But I think I wrote in the chat, and so did Ruth. I would not do what I do in the world and be who I am in the world if I didn't think that I can have an effect on others that can result in a positive change. It might result in a negative change, but I think that we have to all take it upon ourselves to be empowered with the knowledge that what we do, who we are, how we behave does affect and impact others and may in fact propel someone to change.
Very nice. Sherry, thank you. Right? Like, I think that's it with the comments. We have to work towards it. I think, Marlene, it's not an either or, it's a both and there.
Mhm.
Right? I think it, right? I think we can see it as both and.
No,
Sherry,
I
did you
agree.
have
I think it's a good point, and I brought it up only for my own. I was only articulating what was going through my own head.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, hopefully we affect others by our role modeling of the behavior that we have. Or whatever,
Beautiful.
but it's just what was going through my head at the moment.
Wonderful. Sherry, did you have another comment or you?
Exactly what Marlene and Rabbi
Amen,
Laura
amen.
said.
Amen, amen. Right? We're really good. So what a wonderful place. Are you ready for the journey? This is great. Right? And I thank you for all your beautiful contributions. I can't wait for us to study this more. So have a great week. Next week, 11 o'clock, 11 to 12:30. If any of your friends are still thinking about this, there's still time to, miss the introductory lecture, but it'll be available on video and they can easily catch up. Take care, everybody.